The envelope sat on my kitchen counter for 2 days before I even bothered to open it. White, unremarkable, thin enough that I could see the faint outline of the HOA logo bleeding through. I figured it was another newsletter about lawn heights or fence paint colors, one of those small reminders that even in retirement you were never truly free. I'd been in this house for 28 years. I built the deck myself, planted the trees that now shaded half the yard, and watched every storm roll in from the hills behind the creek. I knew every inch of this land, its strengths, its weak spots, its quiet habits. That creek was one of them. It ran along the back edge of 3 properties, mine included, twisting down from the hill like a scar left by time. Most of the year it was calm, a gentle trickle where birds bathed and my grandkids used to float sticks pretending they were pirate ships. But come spring, when the rains hit hard, it turned mean. The water would surge, churning brown and fast, chewing through the soil, flooding the lower yards. I'd watched it swallow flower beds, rot out shed floors, and soak our foundations so badly you could smell the damp in your living room carpet. We complained for years. Letters, meetings, phone calls, always the same polite promises from the HOA that they'd look into it. They never did. Every year we fixed what we could, every year it got worse. Until last summer, when I finally had enough. I wasn't about to watch nature destroy my home while the people in charge sat behind clipboards pretending they cared. So I built something that did, a dam. Not the giant concrete kind, just a compact, carefully built structure of stone, rebar, and reinforced cement, wedged right where the creek narrowed. It wasn't pretty, but it was strong. It slowed the water just enough, easing the pressure downstream, redirecting the excess into a runoff trench that led into the woods. It took me 3 months of early mornings and sore hands, but when the next big storm came, the dam held. Not one drop entered our yards. For the first time in years, I stood at my back fence and watched the storm pass without fear. George and Clara, my neighbors, brought me a bottle of bourbon the next day. Said I'd saved them thousands. It felt good, simple, quiet good, like I'd taken something broken and made it right. Then came the letter. When I finally tore it open, my first thought was that I'd misread something. Fine assessment, $50,000. The number was printed in bold red ink, like blood against the page. My hands actually stopped moving. I read it again, then a third time. The reason: unauthorized alteration of community water flow and property modification without approval. My dam. The one that had saved our yards. For a full minute, I just stood there in the kitchen, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. $50,000, that was half my retirement fund. It wasn't a fine. It was an execution. At the bottom was the signature. Marlene Greaves, HOA president. I knew Marlene. Everyone did. She was one of those people who wore authority like a crown, always strutting through neighborhood meetings with her clipboard and fake smile. The type who thought rules were holy scripture, unless they benefited her friends, of course. I'd had my run-ins with her before, usually over something trivial. But this was new. Attached to the letter were official documents, county permits, approval notices, citations. But even at a glance, they looked off. The seals were crooked, the ink too light, the language sloppy. They cited subsection 14B of the local hydroengineering code. I'd lived here 3 decades and never heard of a hydroengineering code. My first thought was that it had to be a clerical mistake. Maybe someone filed the wrong paperwork. Maybe she meant to send this to a developer or a contractor. So I called the HOA number listed on the letter. It went straight to Marlene's house. She picked up on the second ring. Her tone was sugar-coated but sharp, the kind of voice that smiles while holding a knife behind its back. I told her about the fine, explained that the dam wasn't some vanity project. It was protecting homes. There was a pause. Then that clipped, measured tone of hers came through. The fine stands. That's all she said before hanging up. That night, I sat in my recliner staring at the folded letter on the coffee table. My wife was gone, passed 3 years ago, and the house felt emptier than usual. I could almost hear her voice telling me to stay calm, to be patient. But patience had already cost me flooded floors and years of frustration. Something about this didn't smell like bureaucracy. It smelled like a setup. I dug out every old HOA letter I'd kept. Each one dismissing our complaints about the creek, each one signed by Marlene. The issue lies outside HOA jurisdiction. The cost of correction exceeds the HOA budget. On and on. And now, after I fixed it myself, suddenly it was their jurisdiction. I didn't sleep that night. The rain started around midnight, a light drizzle tapping on the windows. By 2 a.m, it had turned into a full storm, wind howling through the trees, thunder rolling off the hills. I went out to the back porch with a flashlight and watched the water slam against the dam. The structure held, steady and unmoved. My yard stayed dry. The system worked, and yet, according to Marlene, it was an illegal structure. The next morning, I printed photos of the flood from years past, compared them with the current dry yard, and began organizing them into a folder. I figured if I was going to fight this, I'd need proof, real, undeniable proof. By noon, I'd already drafted an email to the entire HOA board. Polite, factual, detailed. I attached photos, explained the years of neglect, described how the dam had saved the neighborhood from serious damage. Then I waited. For 2 days, nothing. Then one reply came in, from a board member named David, short and cautious. He said he understood my situation, but that Marlene was adamant. He suggested that if I removed the dam and apologized, the board might consider reducing the fine. I stared at that line for a long time. Apologize. Apologize for fixing what they ignored. Apologize for protecting my home. That was when the anger finally settled in, heavy and cold. I went back to the letter on my counter and looked at it one last time. The red ink, the fake seals, the arrogance behind it all. Something inside me shifted. If Marlene wanted a fight, she was going to get one. And this time, I wasn't the one who'd end up underwater. The morning after I sent that email to the board, I woke up to the sound of gravel crunching outside. When I looked out my kitchen window, a white county vehicle was parked in front of my house. A man in uniform stepped out, talking on his radio, then started walking toward my front door. For a moment, I actually felt relieved. Finally, someone official who might listen. But the second I opened the door, that relief vanished. The badge on his chest read, Deputy Sheriff. His face was blank, unreadable, the kind of face you see when someone's already decided which side they're on. He asked if I was Jack Miller, then handed me a folded envelope thicker than the one before. His tone was clipped, professional, but distant. Sir, you are hereby ordered to remove an unpermitted structure illegally altering a community waterway. Failure to comply within 48 hours may result in criminal charges. Criminal. The word hit me like a hammer. I told him there had to be a mistake, that the HOA's documents were forged, that they had no jurisdiction over natural creeks. But he just pointed at the paper. I'm not here to debate it, sir. I'm just serving the notice. And just like that, he turned around and left. The gravel crunched again. The county vehicle disappeared down the street. I stood there on my porch with the wind pushing against my shirt, the letter shaking in my hand. I'd never been in trouble with the law, not once in 70 years, but that moment felt like I'd been branded a criminal in my own home. Inside, I unfolded the papers. The order was filled with the same kind of legal jargon Marlene's fine letter had, dense, confusing, intentionally intimidating. But this one had something new, a county seal printed in the top corner. I stared at it for a long time. The lines were warped, the edges faint. It looked wrong. That night I went online to the county's official website. I found their real seal in a PDF file, clean, symmetrical, bold. Side by side, the difference was obvious. Marlene's version wasn't just wrong, it was lazy. She hadn't even gotten the text spacing right. That was the moment everything clicked into place. She hadn't just lied. She had forged a government document. This wasn't about water flow or landscaping rules. It was fraud, and she was willing to use the law, even a deputy, to make it real. I couldn't sleep. I sat in my workshop with the cease and desist order spread out under the lamp, comparing fonts, dates, signatures. Everything about it stank. The signature line had no printed name beneath it. The supposed county official had no listed title. The date format didn't even match standard county documents. Whoever made this had done it fast and sloppy. Assuming I'd be too scared to notice, that was her mistake. By morning, I had a plan. I pulled every photo I had of the dam, from when I first mixed the cement to the latest storm. I printed timestamps, weather reports, and screenshots from my security camera that showed the creek staying perfectly contained during heavy rain. Then I added the old HOA letters where they admitted the flooding issue was beyond budgetary repair. I organized it all into a single binder, labeled tabs for each section. It wasn't just evidence, it was a story that proved I had done everything right, and she had done everything wrong. Still, I needed someone who could validate it professionally. Someone whose opinion couldn't just be brushed aside. So I called Maya. Maya Torres was an old friend from the plant, a civil engineer who'd spent 40 years designing drainage systems, retaining walls and foundations. She was precise, brutally honest, and allergic to nonsense. When I told her what was happening, she didn't even hesitate. She said she'd be over by noon. When she arrived, she didn't waste time on small talk. She just set her bag on my dining table and started reading. The HOA letters, the fine notice, the cease and desist order, the photos, the forged seal. For 20 minutes, the only sound in the room was the flipping of paper and the occasional clink of her coffee cup. Then she looked up, eyebrows raised. "This is garbage," she said flatly, tapping the forged seal. "That code they cited doesn't exist. And these signatures? Same pen, same pressure pattern? This was done by one person. Badly." Hearing it from her, a licensed engineer, was like having a weight lifted off my chest. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining things. Marlene had actually broken the law. We walked out to the backyard. Maya crouched near the dam, measuring the concrete thickness, tracing the flow of water with her finger. She examined the overflow channel, the reinforcement points, the slope. She was silent the whole time, focused like a surgeon. Finally, she stood, brushed the dirt off her hands, and nodded. "It's not just stable," she said. "It's smart. You basically built a small gravity weir. It slows the water without creating back pressure. It's safe and effective." I told her about the storms, about how it had saved our properties. She nodded again, then took out a small water gauge from her kit and set it up behind the dam. "We're going to document everything," she said. "If they want proof, we'll drown them in it." For the next 48 hours, we turned my backyard into a science experiment. We recorded water levels every hour, cross-referenced rainfall data, and logged the flow rate through the overflow channel. Maya took photos, wrote measurements, and even created a simple diagram of how the system worked. By the end of it, she'd compiled a professional 2-page report with her official stamp and license number. It stated that the dam was structurally sound, environmentally safe, and actively preventing property damage from multiple homes. With that in hand, I drafted a formal demand letter to the HOA, polite, firm, direct. I included Maya's report, the side-by-side comparison of the real and forged county seals, and a summary of all my evidence. I demanded they rescind the fine, withdraw the cease and desist, and issue a written apology within 10 business days. I sent it certified mail, return receipt requested. I thought that would be the end of it. Surely no one could argue with the math, the data, or the engineering report. Surely even Marlene would realize she'd gone too far. A week later, another envelope appeared in my mailbox. Same logo. Same weight, inside was a new fine. $10,000, the reason this time. Unauthorized surveillance device. Violation of community privacy standards. They were fining me for my security camera. The one pointed at my own backyard. Attached was another forged document. A new bylaw about residential camera placement that didn't exist in the official HOA handbook. I sat there in my kitchen, holding that letter, and something inside me went very still. This wasn't about rules anymore. It was war, and I wasn't the only one she'd dragged into it, because by then, my neighbors had started noticing too. 2 days after that last fine, I was in my garage sanding a piece of cedar when I heard knocking, sharp, hurried. When I opened the door, I found Tom and Irene from across the creek. They both looked exhausted. Irene was clutching a stack of envelopes just like mine. "She's coming after us too," Tom said. "Same letters, same fake seals. They spread everything out on my workbench. Each notice looked identical. Different accusations, same font, same signature, same bogus county watermark. Tom had been fined for non-compliant fence materials. Irene's offense was excessive decorative lighting, even though she'd just hung solar lanterns. Marlene wasn't enforcing rules. She was manufacturing them. We started making calls. By evening, there were 7 of us standing in my driveway. Homeowners from all sides of the neighborhood, all holding letters that looked like carbon copies of mine. The common thread was obvious. Everyone who'd supported the dam, or even spoken kindly about it, had been fined. That night, under the yellow glow of my porch light, we formed an alliance, not official, not loud, just a quiet understanding. If she wanted a fight, we'd fight smart. Tom worked in IT. Within a few hours, he'd set up a private online folder where everyone could upload their HOA letters, fines, and notices. We compared headers, timestamps, and signatures. One pattern kept repeating. Every document originated from Marlene's personal printer, not the HOA's official system. Her initials were hidden in the file codes. Sloppy, arrogant. It was clear she'd gone rogue. The next morning, we decided to meet at the clubhouse during open hours. The HOA board met there every Thursday, and the bylaws required that members could attend. When we arrived, Marlene was already at the head of the long table, dressed in her usual beige suit, pearl earrings, and that smile that never reached her eyes. Her assistant, Greg, sat beside her, clipboard ready, glasses perched halfway down his nose. "Mr. Miller," she said when she saw me, "if this is about your repeated violations, I suggest it's about your forged documents," I cut in. The room went silent. I placed my binder on the table, opened to the page with the county seal comparison, then slid Maya's engineering report beside it. "You've been using falsified letters and illegal citations to fine residents. That's fraud. And this," I tapped the seal, "is a federal offense." Marlene's smile faltered for the first time. "You're mistaken. These documents were issued through proper channels." "No," said Irene, stepping forward. "We've all received them. Same signature, same date format, same fake seal. You didn't even bother changing the spacing," Tom pulled out his tablet and mirrored it to the clubhouse TV. On screen were 15 different letters, from 7 different residents, all identical except for the names and supposed violations. Greg shifted uncomfortably. "Marlene, maybe we should," she snapped. "That'll be enough, Greg," then turned to us with that same brittle smile. "This is clearly a misunderstanding. If you feel these were sent in error, you're welcome to submit a formal appeal." "I already did," I said. "You rejected it." Her jaw tightened. That was when Tom played the next slide, a digital overlay showing the metadata from one of her PDF letters. The author field read, Marlene, RHOA PC. The software tag showed a personal version of Word, not the HOA's shared office license. "Not only did you make these yourself," Tom said, "you used your home computer." The silence that followed was absolute. You could hear the ceiling fan creaking above us, the faint hum of the vending machine in the corner. For a moment, she looked cornered. Then she did something I didn't expect. She laughed, a short, sharp laugh that cut through the air like glass. "You think anyone outside this neighborhood cares?" she said. "Go ahead, call the county. Call whoever you want. They won't touch it. I have friends there. And if you think that little cement pile you built gives you leverage, wait until the next storm. You'll be begging me for sandbags." She stood, gathered her papers, and walked out, heels clicking across the tile. Greg scrambled after her, avoiding eye contact with everyone. The board meeting dissolved. No one said a word, but something changed that night. Fear turned into anger. Over the next week, word spread fast. Homeowners started talking at the mailboxes, in driveways, at the diner outside the neighborhood gates. Everyone had a story. Lost appeals, surprise fees, threats hidden in legal language. And all of them led back to Marlene. That's when a quiet rebellion began. Tom created a private mailing list under the name Residents for Truth. Within days, half the community had joined. We started pooling resources, gathering evidence, documenting every letter, every threat, every recording. And then one night, Maya called me. "I've been reviewing your creek measurements," she said. "Jack, There's something weird about those drainage reports they cited. What kind of weird? They don't match the county maps at all. It's like someone fabricated an entire flood zone report. That stopped me cold. If she was right, then Marlene hadn't just forged letters. She'd altered official environmental data. That's not HOA mischief. That's felony territory. I knew what I had to do. I called the county clerk's office first thing the next morning. They confirmed my suspicion. No floodplain reclassification had been filed in over 20 years. The report Marlene referenced didn't exist in their system. By afternoon, I was sitting in a detective's office at the county sheriff's department with my binder open on his desk. He was a calm man, gray hair, steady voice, the kind who didn't rush to conclusions. He flipped through the pages, pausing at the forged seal, the fake citations, the metadata screenshots. When he reached Maya's report, he leaned back in his chair and sighed. "This is serious," he said. "We've had complaints about that HOA before, but never with evidence like this." He took photos, made copies, and asked me to leave everything with him. He promised to investigate quietly. For the first time in months, I walked out of that building feeling like I wasn't alone. I drove home as the sun set behind the hills, the creek glinting gold beside the road. The dam stood solid, steady, exactly as I'd built it. But that peace didn't last long, because the next morning, I woke to the sound of engines, diesel engines, idling near my fence line. When I stepped outside, I saw them. 3 trucks. County vehicles. And Marlene standing beside them, smiling. They came at sunrise. 3 county trucks, a backhoe, 2 workers in reflective vests, and Marlene standing proud at the front, clipboard in hand. That smug little smile painted across her face like victory was already hers. I didn't need to ask what they were there for. The backhoe's bucket was already swinging toward the dam. I stepped forward, blocking the path. "You don't have authorization to touch that structure," I said, holding out the detective's card like a badge. "There's an open investigation," Marlene's smile widened. "Not anymore. The county reviewed your little project. They've decided it's an obstruction to a public waterway." She looked at the crew. "Proceed," the operator hesitated. He was a big guy, probably mid-40s, with grease under his nails and that tired look of someone who doesn't get paid enough to pick sides. "Ma'am, this doesn't look like standard demo paperwork. It's official," she snapped. "You do your job, or I'll have your supervisor do it for you." That was all it took. The backhoe roared to life. I shouted over the noise, "You're making a mistake! That dam is preventing flood damage." But my voice was swallowed by the sound of steel on concrete. The bucket slammed down, chunks of cement flying into the air. Water gushed through the cracks. The creek, once calm, surged with new life, angry, violent, uncontrolled. Within minutes, the entire structure was gone. Marlene turned to me as the last pieces disappeared under the torrent. "There, back to how nature intended," I wanted to shout. To rage, but all I felt was silence. A cold, hollow kind that doesn't leave room for words. The trucks left, and she followed, her taillights fading around the curve of the road. The creek ran fast and brown, chewing at the edges of the bank. I stood there until dark, just watching the water undo months of work, years of patience. The next morning, it rained. Not a drizzle, a full storm, the kind that rattles windows and bends trees. The creek rose fast, faster than I'd ever seen. I stood at my window helpless as the water overflowed. Within an hour, it crossed the road. Within 2, it reached Marlene's side of the neighborhood. By noon, her pristine lawn was underwater. By evening, so was her living room. The irony was brutal. The very dam she'd destroyed had been holding that flood back for years. Now, without it, nature came collecting its debt. I called the county emergency line, reported the flooding, and offered to help with sandbags. Not out of spite, because it was the right thing to do. But when I arrived at her house, she stood on her porch, drenched and furious, yelling orders at anyone who'd listen. When she saw me, she screamed, "You did this! You sabotaged it!" I just shook my head. "No, you did." The sheriff's department arrived later that night. Same detective. He pulled me aside while his deputies spoke to the crew members and collected documents. When I told him everything that happened, he nodded slowly. She used those forged orders to get county access, he said. We traced the paperwork back to her personal email. She even forged the county clerk's signature. They arrested her that same night. Fraud, forgery, abuse of authority. Environmental negligence. The neighborhood fell silent for weeks after that. No letters, no fines. Just the sound of reconstruction. People repairing what the flood had ruined. Replacing floors, repainting walls, rebuilding trust. The HOA board dissolved quietly soon after. The county took temporary oversight, then restructured the entire association. Elections were held. Tom was voted in as president. Irene handled communications. Maya became an honorary advisor. As for me, I rebuilt the dam. Smaller this time, reinforced with stone and steel. Officially approved, county stamped, and inspected. Every now and then, I walk down to the creek at sunset. The water runs smooth again, clear and steady. The air smells like wet pine and new soil. Sometimes I think about how fast everything can turn, how one person's obsession with control can destroy what everyone else built together. But then I remember that morning after the storm, when the clouds broke open and sunlight hit the water like gold. The dam held, the creek flowed, and for the first time in a long time, the neighborhood was quiet. Justice doesn't always come fast. But when it does, it's loud enough to drown out every lie,